Hi, welcome to the Cook's Domain. Now I'm sure you can tell that the voice isn't matching what you're watching, and that's because we had an audio malfunction for this first clip. But basically I'm saying that this video is going to be about braising, and I've got some tough cuts, short ribs, and I'm going to braise those and turn them into something absolutely delicious. Cheaper cuts of meat just have so much flavour. I'm sure you know when you've had a steak, you know how mild the flavour is of steaks. Fillet steak being the most expensive has such a mild flavour. Well, when you go the other way, beef, meats, whatever, have such strong flavours, but they're tough to eat. A lot of these are almost impossible to eat, which is where braising comes in, and that's what we're going to do today. Now, short ribs come, like ribs do come, as a rack. These would have been all attached, for example, as one whole rack. And what I did is I just ran a knife in between the bones just to separate them. Okay, so once you've got your ribs cut, you're going to need to do one preparation step, which is to heavily salt them. Absolutely cover all sides in salt, put them in a bowl and into the fridge overnight. I've already done that step with these. Now you can also at that point add some aromatics. So I put a little bit of thyme, a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of sage into the bowl with them. I also cut some onions and some garlic, some celery, and just mixed it all in and then left it in the fridge for 24 hours. And once you've done that, we can then take the ribs out, absolutely remove all of the aromatics from them. You don't want any bits of celery or any bits of onion left on them because we're going to sear them, and we don't want those vegetables, those aromatics, from burning. So I've just separated them for now. I'm leaving them to one side. We are going to use them. Okay, so what I did then, just to make sure that I didn't have anything left on there, is I gave them a quick rinse in some cold water, and now I'm going to season them again before I put them into a hot pan to sear. Okay, so take a wide pan that's going to be able to fit our ribs in and pour in a good amount of oil, about 3 tablespoons I would have thought, but more than enough to cover the bottom so that we can sear these ribs and get on a very, very high heat. Okay, so while we're waiting for the heat for the oil to come up to temperature, I'm now going to re-season my ribs with some salt. Make sure you season all sides. Also some black pepper. We're waiting to see just a few whips of smoke coming off of the oil. That's how we know it's going to be blistering hot. Okay, so when our oil is ready, and as we can see, a little bit of smoke is coming off of them, we can now place our ribs in. We want the fattier, meaty side, not the bone side, but the meaty side to be put down. Now you want to cover as much of the pan as you can. Now what we're doing here is searing. This is going to give us the Maillard reaction. It's going to caramelize our meat. It's going to bring some of those proteins that are in there. It's going to caramelize them. It's going to make them sweet. It's where most of the good flavor in meat comes from. It's why we sear a steak. Now I've heard this referred to as sealing, and I just want to clarify right now. There's no such thing as sealing. We're not sealing anything here. You can't seal meat when you put it into a pan. It's just a completely incorrect term. And once we start braising it, it will leach its flavors into the braising liquid. And we've got a nice color, braising color there. So we can get a bit more. Let's just leave it there for a bit more, a bit longer. And we want to sear all sides. Okay, so when we've got a good sear all round, we can now just take them out, just put them in a bowl, get them out of the way, and we can start searing our other pieces. Okay, now what you want to do is turn the heat down to just under medium, and so that we don't burn all the soot that's underneath, or what the Americans call fond for some reason. We want to add those onions and garlic and all those good things that we had from from when we brined our meat. Just move that around, try and pick up as much as we can off the bottom, because that's all flavour. Now if you don't want to add any aromatics during the brining, you can just cut some fresh onion now, some fresh garlic, anything else that you want to put in there, and just throw it straight into the pan. We also want to add to this a good couple of tablespoons worth of tomato puree. There we go. Just finish off my tube here. And just using a spoon, we're going to saute the tomato off. As we can see, it's brought the heat down a little bit, so we can turn the heat a little over medium. And now we can add a whole bottle of red wine. Now the red wine obviously is not hot, so it's going to bring down the temperature of our pan. I'm going to turn it all the way to the highest setting now and start pouring our red wine. And the red wine will help deglaze the pan and pick up all those wonderful juices off the bottom. There we go. We want to get this absolutely boiling. We want it to cook off the alcohol, and then we want to reduce, because we want a nice syrupy, fruity base for our short ribs to braise in. Okay, once the wine has been boiling the alcohol off and we've reduced roughly by half, doesn't have to be exact, we can now add a ½ litre of beef stock, which would be great, or you can use a chicken stock, whatever you have, and get that into our pan as well. Let's mix that in. Now to this we want to add a couple of bay leaves if you have them. I only have small pieces, 3 little pieces of bay leaf, and a little bouquet garni here of sage, thyme and rosemary. Let's get that in there as well. We want to get some beautiful flavors here. Now make sure your oven is on. You want it at 170 degrees Celsius, and we want to get our short ribs back into the pan. Now you don't have to sit them bone side down now or anything, just whatever's easiest to get them in. They do not have to be completely covered by the liquid either. So once we've got them all in, we can put the lid on and transfer the whole thing into our oven. We're going to cook them for about 3 hours, but at the 1.5 hour mark I'm going to take them out and just turn them all over onto the other side, and then leave it for the other 1.5 hours, and we'll have perfectly cooked braised short ribs. So with our short ribs in the oven, we can now start thinking about what are we going to serve this with. It's not something I usually discuss. I show you guys how to make the main dish and leave the sides up to you. But I thought it's a good opportunity to talk about this, because I'm going to make something called scalloped potatoes. Now, there are quite a few different recipes for scalloped potatoes, and there's a reason for that. It's not that the one is better than the other, it's because side dishes need to be paired with the main dish. Sam the cooking guy, for example, has a wonderful recipe for scalloped potatoes. So rich, so creamy, so decadent, with goat's cheese and truffle. It's amazing. But you could never have that with short ribs. It's almost the main dish in its own right. But it would be wonderful with something delicate, whether that would be fish or just a roast turkey or roast chicken or something like this. That scalloped potatoes with such strong flavors would be great. I mean, you've got to think about how we pair foods. Curries, for example, such strong aromatic flavors with so much spice, and we pair it with rice, which is very plain, you know, and that together creates that wonderful combination. So I'm going to be doing a scalloped potato. My recipe, because the short rib is going to be so strong in flavor, that it's going to be meaty, it's going to be savory, and the wine sauce is going to be so rich in flavor and so, you know, fruity.
to have a decadent side would only confuse the plate. So I'm going to show you how to make a scalloped potato. It's a little simpler to make, so very mild on some of the flavors. It's still going to be creamy, still going to be a little bit decadent, but it's going to be the perfect complement for our short ribs. Okay, so quickly, how to make a very simple scalloped potato side dish for our short rib. Get a couple of potatoes, cut them as, you know, relatively thin, but not very thin. There is a much fancier version of this dish where it's wafer thin and multiple layers. We don't need to do that. This is going to be just a nice hearty side dish for us. So cut them relatively thin. What we want to do first though is, after we've cut them, that is get our cream and our milk ready so that we can coat our potatoes in. So I've got some cream here. Let's just get a little bit of that in there. It's about 100 mils of fresh cream, a particularly thick kind of cream. Let's get roughly the same in full fat milk in here as well. You don't have to measure, it's just enough to coat and cover your potatoes. So I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. With a fork or a whisk, if you have, let's just whisk those two together, the cream and the milk. Okay, when you've got that whisked together, now we need the dish that we're actually going to make the potatoes in. So I've got this, it's relatively thick, it's got some depth to it, and that'll be fine. So what we want to do is start getting some of our potatoes and putting them into the cream solution. We just want them to be nicely coated, and then from there into our pan or our dish, and just put them around. Once we've put that first layer down, we want to get a relatively strong, sharp cheese. I'm using a very mature cheddar here, and we just want to put a light sprinkling of cheddar on the layer. Not a lot. We don't want this to be particularly cheesy, just a little bit. Now with a knife, let's cut off a little bit of our chives, nice and small little pieces of chive. Again, we don't need a lot. Get those, sprinkle those around. Now we can do our next layer of potato. So again, get some potatoes back into the cream. Mix those around, make sure they're nicely coated, and lay this on top. This is a very simple potato dish, but I have to say, very delicious. Once we've done that, we want another scraping of cheese over the top. Just a thin, not a lot, just a little bit. And some more chives. Just sprinkle that on top. Do another layer of our potato. And just keep doing this until you've used up all your potatoes. Got our last layer on. And again, another sprinkling of cheese. Not a lot, we're not overdoing this. Pour the milk and cream fluid in here. Once we've topped it up with our cream, just get a little bit more of the chives on top, and another sprinkling of our cheese. And there we have it. All we have to do now is put that in the oven at the 170 degrees that it's already set at for about an hour and a half till we get a nice crispy cheesy kind of top, and it will be ready to go. I thought I'd quickly mention, as you may have noticed, that I didn't add any seasoning. Now, the reason for that is the cheese. I'm using an aged, mature cheese here, and it's quite salty. Taste the cheese that you're going to be adding, see how salty it is, see whether you think it would do the seasoning job for you. If you don't, then add some salt, of course. But I won't be doing that because my cheese is quite salty. So yeah, let's get it in the oven, see what it looks like. Okay, so we're now at the hour and a half mark. So I'm going to get the short ribs out of the oven. Now what we want to do here is to carefully turn these around so the other side can be sitting in the liquid. Once we've done that, we want to put the lid back on and get it back in the oven for another hour and a half. Okay, so with the 3 hours up, our beef should now be perfectly braised. So I'm going to take it out of the oven and we're going to see what it looks like. Okay, so let's see if it's fork tender. Oh, straight through, straight through. That's perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the beef out and put it on a plate to the side for the minute, and we'll just cover it in foil just to keep it warm while we finish our sauce, because this braising liquid is very watery right now and we want to turn it into a thick luxury sauce. Just a little bit of foil over the top. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this back on the hob and we're going to start reducing it and thickening it into a nice thick sauce. Okay, so we're just going to bring this up to a boil, but while we're waiting for it to boil up, it's our opportunity to take like a small ladle and to start taking off the fat that's on top, because there's a lot of fat with this and you don't need all of that in your sauce. A little bit of fat is fine, but take away as much as you possibly can. So the way I would do it, using just a ladle like this, just dip it slightly under the liquid line and just take up as much of the fat as you can. Now we just want to keep reducing this. Once we've got it boiling, we just want to put it on a light simmer to just let this reduce and thicken to a nice sauce. Okay, so after about 10 minutes or so of just simmering it slowly, you should have a nice thick sauce with a nice sheen to it. Nice and thick, perfect. Now we can put our plate together. And there we have my final plate. Braised short rib, got some scalloped potatoes, some steamed veg, and some mushroom lightly fried in with some smoky bacon. And let's see what the braised rib looks like. It should be tender, it should be soft. Oh my god, just look at that. Just look how it comes apart. Gorgeous, so tender. It's got a beautiful bark on it. Let's get some sauce on it. That is so good. These cheaper cuts of meat have so much flavour, and when you cook them right and they're tender, the flavour is unbelievable. Like nothing you would have experienced. Absolutely delicious. Let's get a bit of mushroom on there as well. Got a bit of more sauce. That is so good. Go to your butcher, get some short rib. You will not be disappointed. And please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Help the channel grow. If you like what we're doing, then please subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.